are listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I'm Kyle Bryant.
And I'm Sean Baumstark. And together, we're navigating life with disability.
Hello, world. Welcome to the podcast.
Here it is.
What do you think of the opening? Was that pretty good or what?
No, I think that's a good way to welcome everybody.
Yeah, we're reaching out to the world here,
This is our white flag. Hey, world, come listen.
Our white flag. Are we giving up? We're surrendering?
No, we're just. Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't know what. It's not white.
Anyway, this is the podcast. We are doing a podcast now, and I think that's crazy, partly because we are just kind of learning as we go. We didn't know what we were doing before, 4 months ago, and we spent the last 4 months, just figuring out how to make it happen.
I think that's probably true, though, of most things we do in our lives. We don't really know what we're doing. Then we got to spend several months just figuring it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened for us, between us, 3 or 4 times before where I go, hey, Sean, I think we should ride our bikes to Las Vegas.
Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the response I get.
I didn't even have a bike at that time. Do you remember that? We sat down, and I'm pretty sure the restaurant was Waterboy or the one right next door, Rubicon.
Rubicon, yeah.
And we were talking about the ride ataxia 2. Back then, they were numbers, not necessarily designated event cities. And we were doing number 2, which was from Sacramento to Vegas.
Number 2, ride ataxia 2, not correct. Number 2.
No, yeah, right. Good point. Thank you. And you're like, hey, I'm going to do this Vegas. Let's try to get some people. And I'm like, shoot, I want to help, but I don't have a bike. I better get one.
Yeah. So that's how it works. I mean, we, neither of us knew any, well, I guess we knew a little bit because we'd both been on a guest on a podcast before. But other than that, we didn't know anything about how to get it done.
True. We just knew we wanted to do one, and we thought we might do okay doing one together. So hopefully somebody else thinks that same thing.
Yep. That is the hope. I hope more people are listening than just my mom and your mom. That's,
Well, I'm sure your dad is listening too, so that's a bonus.
Okay, yeah, and maybe Uncle Steve.
Hey, Uncle Steve.
Cool.
Oh man!
All right.
So where did this come from? How did we get started on this, Kyle?
Well, so I was watching the movie, the documentary that we're both in, and just realizing how much stuff is in there that just is sort of applicable to everyday life. And, partly it was just me wanting to discuss it and figure it out more and go a little bit deeper in some of the topics. And I was like, oh, that would be good for a podcast. And then somebody called me up, emailed me and invited me on one of their podcasts. And it went really well. And I was like, you know what? If they can do it, I think Sean and I can do it. And so that's kind of where it came from. And I called you up on my way back from an event. I was driving with a hands-free headset. So
good job. Proud
trying
of
to be
you.
safe in the car. And, we started talking and decided we wanted to do it. And 4 months later, here we are.
Yeah, hopefully we're getting it all worked out. There were a lot of things we had to figure out once we both decided, yeah, let's do a podcast, then, so many logistics of, do we have the right equipment, your computer, my computer, what do we really need to pull this thing off? And I know you did a bunch of research online and really figured out that if we had halfway decent microphones, we might be able to record a halfway decent conversation between the two of us.
Yeah. And one thing that we should point out is Sean is on the West Coast, and Kyle, that's me,
Best
is
coast.
on the East Coast.
East
and
Coast.
so that's really, we had to figure that one out. Like, how are we going to record this when we're not even in the same room? And I think it's working out. So we got a Skype call going right now, and that's kind of how it's working out. So what do you hope to accomplish with this podcast, Sean?
Well, I ultimately hope to get rich and famous. And if this is not really.
That's not what you said before.
I think with this podcast, I just hope to be a voice of encouragement for a lot of people dealing with Friedreich's ataxia or other conditions in life. Obviously, we're both threatened with this short-term life, and I hope to be able to leave a positive mark and contribute whatever I can. And, I jokingly said it not too long ago in a patient panel in Florida. You and I were both there. I think I jokingly had said something like, if I had $1 million to give, I would. But since I don't have money, what can I do? And part of my contribution is really just being available and sharing my experiences as I go. And hopefully it adds value to somebody else along the way.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of it, where it comes from is that you and I enjoy talking to each other.
Sure.
And we're comfortable talking about, well, I am anyway. I hope you are too. I hope that's a shared comfort.
It is.
Talking about our disease, something that we share that not very many other people in the world share. And we love being able to feel comfortable talking about it. And, I feel comfortable with you and lots of my other friends that have FA or other progressive diseases, debilitating diseases. And so just talking about it, I think, goes a long way in the conversation. And I hope that some other people feel comfort hearing us talk about it too, I guess. And maybe that's, and that's where the conversation starts. And we hope that this podcast starts a few conversations.
To paint a correlation, there's so much, I believe so much, it's going to sound cliche, but some power when you begin talking about things. It doesn't seem to have as much of a stronghold or grip on your mental energy or the way you're pursuing life. So when you sit here and you say things like talk about this condition or other things similar, it reminds me of stories I've heard from you where it took you some time to get to a point where you were talking about your diagnosis. And I'm hoping that the more conversations like ours are available and out there, it empowers other people to move along in their process and talk about things, whether it's a condition or certain symptoms or certain challenges they face every day.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on, and like you said, when I was first diagnosed, I didn't talk about it for a couple years, even with my close friends or family. I just didn't know how, and I just wasn't emotionally prepared to do that. I just wasn't prepared to do that at age 17, and I think that my family was incredible because my parents, during the time when I wasn't ready to talk about it, they were going to support group meetings. They were looking stuff up online and starting to discover all these things. As hard as that was, to see the future of what this disease had in store for our family, when I was ready to talk about it, they were prepared with at least the beginning of answers, and at the very least, they knew where to find the answers we might be looking for. And so, but when we started talking about it, that's kind of a turning point in my life when I started facing up to this disease and facing this challenge and being like, all right, here it is. What are we going to do with it? And the first step was just acknowledging it.
Sure. What do you think? This is a question I haven't asked you before, and I haven't heard you talk on it. But I know it took you 2 years to get to the point where you started to face it and talk about it. Why do you suppose it took you that long? I know you were young, emotionally a different place than maybe you are today. But even at the age of 17... what do you suppose is something or some of the reasons that kept you from talking about it?
I think I thought a lot of myself. I didn't want to have a reason to think less of myself, and hopefully maybe that's something that a lot of people hold in common. But just facing the reality of the situation. Like, I think we all have this vision for our lives, right? And to see that crumbling and totally changing and trying to figure out how I'm going to handle that change, I just was not ready for that. And I think I just delayed that, facing that reality as long as possible.
Sure. So tell us, since we already started this, why don't you, will you tell us what began to happen in your life after those 2 years passed and you started talking about it?
So as soon as I could start talking about it, that's what allowed action, I think, to enter the picture. When I was so scared to talk about it, it was kind of paralyzing. And once I faced it and I realized I had so much support around me in my family and my friends, I realized that I could do this, and, this isn't going to totally crush me. Let's do something about it. Let's rethink the future, rethink what this means for my life, because life is not over, which was definitely one thought that entered my mind. And there's a lot more life to live, so let's figure out what to do with it.
And that Kyle is talking about, we'll get into a little more detail here momentarily, but Kyle said it, and I think I did too. Friedreich's ataxia is the disease, neuromuscular condition that Kyle and I have both been diagnosed with. Kyle at the age of 17, me at the age of 25, and it causes a whole bunch of damage to our entire body and threatens to end life early due to heart disease. But Kyle is really good at explaining the science behind this disease. So, Kyle, we'll get to that in a minute. But the that we're talking about, what would you say, once you began to talk about it and, like you said, it allowed for action to enter the picture and begin to be a part of the journey, what are some of the steps you initially took?
These are tough questions, dude. So I think really it began with just being able to think past past FA and think past this huge insurmountable challenge that it seemed to be. And that's when ideas started forming in my head with how am I going to respond to this challenge? And I think that's really how it began, like sort of just in my head, being able to think about it. And, you know, a few years later, I started realizing that we needed to take action. And so we did. So I looked online and I saw this guy who was about to circumnavigate the country on a tricycle. He had MS, and he was standing next to his trike on this webpage, and I was reading about him, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I can do that. And so I started looking into it more and more, and I found a trike dealer near where I was, and I drove up there one weekend, and I went for a test ride in the parking lot. And I was like, holy cow, I can finally move under my own power. I hadn't walked very far for like several years. And all of a sudden I could move down the street at, 20 miles per hour if I wanted to, under my own power. And I think I just started visualizing where it could take me. And so in 2007, so my first bike ride was 7 miles. And I was so proud of myself. I couldn't believe I had that. I could do that. And now I did 14 and 25 and then 50. And then only 4 months after my first ride, I went for a century ride.
Wow.
And I was the last one on the road, but I finished it. I did it.
It's huge.
And from then on, the sky was the limit.
Sure.
So I decided to do a cross-country bike ride. Starting in San Diego, my dad and I rode our bikes to Memphis, Tennessee. And my mom drove the support vehicle. And it was an insane adventure. And it was just the beginning. We finished this bike ride and we empowered ourselves. And I was writing a blog about every 3 days during that ride. And really the ride started, the movement really started when people were responding to my blog posts with comments and being like, hey, this is awesome. You know, I really respect what you're doing, and it's really encouraging me in my life. And seeing how our actions were affecting other people was really how the ride concept started. And, over the next couple of years, we did 2 more long-distance bike rides, and now I'm on staff at the Friedreich Ataxia Research Alliance. And we have a series of bike rides across the country. We have 6 on our network right now. And, anyone is, we have routes from 5 to 50 miles. And anyone is invited to come out and be empowered and push themselves and contribute to the cause. And so that is the long and short of how it got started.
So when you talk about those rides and the contribution to the cause, what is the effect of those 6 different rides every year today?
So the purpose is to raise money for research. A lot more goes on as far as connections between people and empowerment and awareness and stuff like that. But when we're talking numbers, the ride raises about $800,000 a year for FA research, and for the past several years, we've had over 2,000 participants.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And like I said, there's beyond the money. Those events are so incredible for fostering community and empowering people to be involved and to, take action, like you said. And it helps foster growth and connection among that community. I know I've only been able to do a few of those rides myself, but it's the highlight of the spring, at least for the Northern California ride, because you get to see and hang out with so many amazing people that we've come to know and meet. And almost every year you meet a handful of new ones, and it's just an exciting thing to be a part of. So for whatever it's worth, Kyle, I'm glad you started riding your bike. And I'm glad that I've been able to ride along with you for some of those events. Sorry, I just kicked my microphone.
Hey, it happens.
Anyway, I think it's the bike. The bike is really what's helped you and I stay involved with each other, but it's the diagnosis that you and I that brought us together. I was diagnosed in 2007. I was 25 and immediately got online and trying to learn a little more than what the doctor said over the course of about an hour. So I went home that night. I was just playing around on the internet, keywords, searching all over. And Kyle, that ride across the country that you mentioned, you had just done it 2 or 3 months prior. And since we were from the same city, or we are from the same area, you were all over my local news, the Sacramento Bee and different news channels. So on Google, it had all the stuff showing up, and I'm like, oh, why is local news talking about this guy and this bike race? So the more I read and dug, the more I realized that you and I were the same age, that we're from the same city, and you were diagnosed and living with the same disease that I had just learned about that day. So at some point over the course of a few days, I think I tracked down some sort of email address for you, shot out an email and tried to meet and connect with Kyle and find out, okay, what can you tell me? What am I up against? Knowing that somebody else was in the area with the same diagnosis. And I think it was just 3 weeks later, or maybe 2 weeks, that we met for pizza and a beer downtown Sacramento.
Yeah, man, I remember that, and I just remember feeling empowered because just there's somebody else. Like, I think that's one of the tough things, specifically with a rare disease and with the FA. FA is 1 in 50,000 people, as you know, Sean, and that's about 5,000 people in the U.S. And so, when most people that are not involved in the FA community, if they're listening right now, they've probably never heard the words Friedreich's ataxia before. Mm-hmm. And so when you're first diagnosed, you feel so alone and isolated. And just to have someone to talk to about it, like we were saying before, maybe I'm repeating myself, but that meeting over beers was just to have someone to have a beer with and understand what you're going through was incredible.
I think it's funny that we mentioned beer because one of the symptoms of Friedreich's ataxia is this total gait distribution. So it causes us to have a lack of control and balance, control of our muscles, especially legs and arms, and of course a destroyed sense of balance and a slurred speech. You can probably hear it in our talk today. So really, it's symptomatic of being incredibly inebriated. And I remember being at the restaurant, and back then I was a good boy, and I didn't really drink much of anything. And I remember you had ordered a beer, and I still hadn't experienced too many symptoms, but the doctor told me about them, and I read all about them, and I experienced them to some degree. I remember asking you specifically if it was okay for you to have that beer or if it was going to make things worse for you.
Yep.
Because even then, I didn't know the effects of it.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, it does make things worse if you're talking about the physical symptoms.
Sure.
And of course, that's only temporary. But, so it is absolutely to be used in moderation and, with a certain amount of perspective and respect, but it's not going to kill you.
Yeah, it's not. Well, like I said, it's good to know that the heightened symptoms the heightened effect is just temporary. It's not going to cause any permanent damage,
Right?
Just
and so
because you drank.
So I think we should probably let our listeners know and point out specifically that we're not drunk right now, right, Sean? I mean, I guess I'm 3,000 miles away from you, so I can't see beyond the your computer screen, so you could be drunk. But anyway, one of the symptoms, so FA affects all muscle coordination from the toes to the fingertips. And a group of those muscles are muscles we use to talk. And so that's why we sound like we're drunk. We haven't been drinking, but that's why we sound like it. So the genetics of FA. So DNA is a series of codes, and one of those codes is GAA. Most of the general public has less than 30 repeats of GAA at that code in their DNA. I have 450. Some of our friends with the FA have over 1,000, up to like 1,500 repeats of GAA in their DNA. When that code gets decoded, it makes a protein called frataxin. I don't make enough frataxin. Sean doesn't make enough frataxin. All of our friends with FA, they lack frataxin. And so that is the thing that causes dysfunction. It causes things like extreme fatigue, chronic fatigue, and slurred speech, balance and coordination issues, and vision loss, hearing loss, and life-shortening heart complications. Unfortunately, heart complications are the leading cause of death for somebody with FA. And so this is a life and death situation we're talking about. So when we're raising funds and awareness and stuff, people see me or they see you and they're like, "What's the big deal? Like, you're in a wheelchair. Yeah, that's a bummer, and your speech is a little slurred." But when they're looking at me or you, that person is not seeing the total devastation of this disease, and it affects other people much more severely. And that's what we are working to reverse. And so a little more about FA, how it's inherited, which is a common question, is so it's a double recessive trait. So I got one bad gene from mom and one bad gene from dad, but they had no idea because they had no symptoms. I had a 25% chance of receiving both of their recessive genes, and I was the lucky recipient. Same thing with Sean, too. So it's inherited the same way. And so like I mentioned before, that's 1 in 50,000 people that is affected by FA. But the alarming thing is that 1 in 100 people are carriers. And it just takes 2 carriers that don't know that they are carriers to get together, and then their child has a 25% chance of getting FA when they're born. So, and it's a progressive disease as well. I think that's something to understand. So I mean, I've had it, and Sean has had it our whole lives. But for me, I didn't know until I was 17. Sean, I think you were like 26, right?
25.
25. So, and as we get older, the disease gets worse. And as of now, there is no treatment or cure. But that's what we're working to change. We've got lots of shots on goal in research and drug trials. Sean, were you actually at UCLA in the trial today?
Actually,
hours ago?
I was there. I flew home today, but the trial that I am a part of, all of my assessments ended last night. So, yeah, I did just come back today, although I didn't have any appointments this morning, just a flight home.
Okay.
So, yeah, like I said, there's, with no cure or treatment at this time, there are so many amazing efforts right now moving the needle forward and in the pipeline to help effectively stop or cure this condition. And it's exciting to be around it, to be a part of it, and to help the process. For me, one of the coolest things that I look at when I'm able to, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, I don't have millions to give, but what I do have is time to chat with you like we are right now. But then also, I'm happy to sort of volunteer my body, so to speak, to these trials, because the way I see it, whether this particular trial that I'm doing right now or that particular drug over there or over here has a positive effect, it has an effect that helps us move forward, because either it tells us, yes, we're on the right track, let's keep moving in that direction, or no, the answer isn't that way, let's go this way now. And whatever the answer is, for me, it's exciting to be a part of that process to move us toward a cure. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, and it really brings up an opportunity for me to talk about FARA, the Friedreich Ataxia Research Alliance. I'm on staff at FARA, and we are the largest funder of FA research in the world, and we fund a lot of seed grants that help scientists get much larger grants from bigger organizations like the NIH. But really, we encourage research all over the world and work with other sister organizations just like us as well in other countries, and develop ideas and work with scientists to make connections that really keep the research going. And one of the principles you talked about just now was that, if something doesn't work, then we go a different direction, right? And, the principle, FARA's research pipeline is very deep and diverse. And we have 8 or 9 different ways to approach the disease. And within those different approaches, there are several different projects going on. And so we know that we have to have many shots on goal, or many eggs in many baskets, whatever metaphor you want to use. But
many pucks on the ice.
Yeah, there you go, pucks on the ice.
I think I made that up.
All right. Maybe we can do an episode a little later down the road where all we do is think of different metaphors for that approach.
All right. Sweet.
So anyway, that is FARA, and we really facilitate research, like I said, with lots of different partners, including, government partners, pharma partners, lab partners, scientific partners, other international organizations, and really, with one main focus of treating and curing Friedreich's ataxia. And really, it all stems from, well, a lot of it, we have a strong culture of focus and collaboration. And really, that is led by our co-founder and president, Ron Bartek. He's just an amazing human being who really survives off of like smiles and hugs. And
That's true.
Really, any group he's in, he promotes collaboration over everything else. And, everyone in the organization and everyone that knows him knows that he stands for collaboration, and everyone follows when they're around him. And so, thank you to Ron Bartek, but also, just that I've really come to know that is so important. Just focus and principles and everyone on the same page in an organization. We have an amazing board of directors, and we have a really strong mission and vision that everyone really adheres to and looks at and keeps it in mind in everything we're doing. And it's just, I feel very fortunate to be working for FARA and to be in the community that we are both in.
There's a part of me, I just think, yeah, you're super cool. You have a cool job. I bag groceries for a living, whatever. But anyway, there's a part of me, Kyle, that really, I think you have a great job, and I love the part you get to play in the organization. And I'm not gonna lie, I send a letter and a petition to Ron every March, asking him to replace you with me.
Whoa.
Okay,
dude,
that's not true. I've never done that. Although I jokingly said something to Jennifer Farmer once.
The fact that you even said that makes me a little concerned, man. I need to step up my game.
Or maybe Farrah just needs to open a West Coast office so I can get involved there.
All right, all things to work on.
Right. Well, I think it's cool, and I love that you shared so much about FARA, because at the end of the day, no matter what we're doing, or no matter what the day job is, or our level of progression, or our level of ability, all things said and done, like I said, FARA is the leading organization worldwide, leading the efforts in battling this condition. So it's an exciting organization to be connected to be related to help with, and to do whatever we can to move the needle forward, which, like you mentioned, this drug trial I'm doing right now is facilitated because of organizations, or really because of FARA. So even though I'm not on staff, I'm happy to be connected to them and be a part of the community in whatever capacity I can be.
Awesome. So a little earlier I talked about collaboration, and we're part of a much bigger community as well, Sean, and so FA affects 1 in 50,000. That's about 5,000 people in the U.S. The definition of a rare disease in the U.S. is a disease that has a population of less than 200,000 people. And FA has 5,000 people, so that's pretty rare. And but if we consider ourselves in the group of rare diseases in general, all these diseases that have a population of less than 200,000, that's 7,000 different diseases. And that means there's 25 million people in the U.S. that have a rare disease. And that makes our numbers a little more powerful, I think. And so a lot of the work that Farah does is collaborating with other rare disease organizations and doing work on behalf of all rare diseases, because really we're all in this together, and we're all after the same thing, a treatment and a cure for our specific disease.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I think you also make it's a good point, and also helps tie in really part of the reason why you and I are doing this podcast. Sure, we want to call attention to Friedreich's ataxia. We want to help raise awareness. But it goes beyond that particular disease itself, which is really what I think helped bring you and I together. And we have the same thought process of making the most out of life while we can, simply because we can. And really part of the reason why we're even having these conversations together is to help encourage people in the world to do the same, whether they're up against Friedreich's ataxia or Huntington's or MS or cancer or whatever the issue is. There's still so much more to life than just that condition or just that disease. And I think you made a great point earlier when you asked the question, Kyle, what can I do in spite of it? Or what can I do with this in mind? How can I still take action even though I'm living with this condition? And that's really a part of the reason why you and I are having this conversation today and every other day that we record.
Yep. Yeah. And to have this conversation and include so many other people that have, a similar mindset, I think it's one of the things I'm excited about. I mean, this is our first episode, and I'm just excited to see what happens, really, and just to hope that these conversations are just the beginning of hopefully what might be.
Absolutely. Then it's good. I was just thinking we're definitely gonna have to bring on some other people, because I don't know that we're gonna be that effective, just you and I. We're gonna need some other value adding folks to jump in on the conversation with us.
Yeah, we talked about it, Sean, and we're gonna bring in some people who are perhaps experts on clinical trials, adaptive sports, adaptive equipment, maybe, a lot of different topics. I think we're definitely going to try to bring in people who know a lot more than you or I do about all this stuff that we want to talk about.
For sure. I think that's also, it seems to me, a perfect and natural time to A, say welcome again to all of our listeners today, and then B, invite you to come along for the conversation and get involved. You can find us online at twodisableddudes.com. Connect with Kyle and I on Facebook or Instagram or whatever platform you enjoy the most, and let us know what Kyle and I can bring to the conversation that might be helpful or useful for you. If you have questions or thoughts or comments or suggestions or sponsor ideas so we can make millions, whatever it may be, we just invite you to hang out with us and to keep giving us some input to make this better and effective.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Sean, this has been awesome. I'm really excited for the podcast, and thank you for the conversation today.
Absolutely. This is a great one. And, before we sign off, there are probably a couple of people we want to say thank you to before we wrap this up. What do you think, Kyle? I think of one lady in particular that really helped us get to where we're at today. And she's a friend of yours, and you brought her to the table. So I'll let you talk about her for a minute.
Yeah, Lindsay Rourke really helped us put together the vision for this podcast, and really helped us get on track with finding our voice and trying to make sure that this is not our only episode. Planning for the future and making sure we can execute into the future. So thank you, Lindsay, for getting us started.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. And then I don't know if we've mentioned it. I guess we haven't mentioned it before. This is episode number 1, or the introduction to Two Disabled Dudes podcast. But Kyle and I have a mutual friend who's also living with Friedreich's ataxia. Jake Tompkins is the guy putting the music to the podcast and helping us piece together our phone calls. So, Jake, thank you for your help and what you're doing to make this thing work.
Yeah, Jake. Yeah.
Kyle, looking forward. What is this? Every other week. So looking forward to our next conversation, and of course, looking forward to connecting with others in the community. Thanks for listening today.
Yep. Thank you, Sean, and all you listeners. We will see you next time. Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. To find this episode and links to some of the stuff we talked about today, find us online at twodisableddudes.com or subscribe on iTunes.
We'd like to hear from you and feature your feedback and questions on future podcasts. Be sure to visit us at twodisableddudes.com to find our contact info and connect on social media.
Special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins, who also composed the music.
We'll share a new podcast every other week. We hope you'll listen and share with a friend. Until next time, keep living with urgency.